What's going on, everybody? Welcome in to the Daily Dime. One of the best times of year here, Zach, for us. We got PGA that I'm getting ready for. It starts tomorrow. We've got NFL playoffs, of course, the divisional round, and we're in the heart of the NBA season. So lots of picks to talk through. Might even talk some PGA. We'll definitely talk some NFL as well. We're, of course, going to start in the NBA streets. How are you feeling about just this slate in this time of year?
I'm going to enjoy this slate because it's the first double-digit game slate we've had in many, many weeks. So that helps us, I think, from a prop perspective. Now, the fact that we have 2, 4, 6, 8 teams on the second end of a back-to-back does slow our roll a little bit here around lunchtime because we're still waiting on those injury reports. So some teams we have strong leans on in the model, but we don't have news, and that would completely change things if news breaks right. But I think we've got a couple really solid picks. Those who tune in on a daily basis here on the Daily Dime, we're going to talk about some familiar names. We'll get there, okay? But I'm very excited that you, again, now that we're getting into PGA season, you're diving into that. I know we have the NFL projections updated here just before we went live, so maybe we're diving into some of that. Even if we don't, all of the FTN fantasy subscribers who want to see those NFL projections for the upcoming divisional round, you can go to the site now and see those. And maybe, if you see something on the site, come back here into the live chat. You put it in there and we can discuss it. So I see P Mike in here. I see JJ in here. So good to see you boys. Anybody else that's tuned in, whether you're on the YouTube or coming to us from Twitter, you can jump into that YouTube live chat. We always love the participation, and we've found some winners from some of our subscribers in the live chat. So I'm excited to get into this. A lot to talk about here on our Wednesday.
Yes, Zach especially has been Zed, not you, Zach, but the other Zach. In fact, has been posting a bunch lately about just like hitting 3-pick plays, 4-pick plays, whatever, straight from the model and just trusting it. So always good to see. I know we can say it's straight from the model, but let's all remember a lot of the projections in the model are coming from the noggin model from our guy right here. So awesome to see all of that. And of course, the same can be said on the NFL side of things. So Zach, why don't you take us to your favorite pick of the night?
Yeah, starting on underdog here, and I am, as we go, I'm trying to build out a little 6-pick on prize picks as well, because there are some advantageous lines that are not as juicy for us here on underdog over there on prize picks. So I will touch on those as we go. But let's start with Amon Thompson. I mentioned we're going to some familiar names. They gave us double-double again at 1.17x. Like, again, foul trouble, injury, certainly concerns. Could they get blown out here in Denver tonight in the elevation? Maybe. But this is a 1-point spread, 231.5 implied total. So this one is going to get up and down here. And Amon Thompson just really isn't coming off the court. Nothing has changed with this team's rotation. Jabari Smith still out. Tari Eason still doubtful. So we're not expecting Tari to come in here and muck things up. We've got Amon once again. Very, very almost identical projection to what we had on Monday when this came through. 16 points, 9.3 rebounds in 38 minutes. But like I mentioned, Amon's not really coming off the floor. He had foul trouble 2 games ago, still crested 35 minutes. And he's gone over 40 minutes in 3 of his last 4. He's played more than 33.5 minutes. There's my, arbitrary sample size line there today for Amon Thompson, but 12 times getting more than 33.5 minutes this season. He's doubled in 8 of those 12. Give me another 38, 40 minutes of Amon Thompson. Absolutely love the double prop once again. And over there on prize picks, I will note, I do like his higher than 39 fantasy score as well. I don't believe they have a double prop over there. Certainly not one that gives us a payout boost. So this is where I love to start all my entries here this morning, because it's just Amon Thompson is a double machine. If you're going to give him close to 40 minutes, almost matchup agnostic.
Yeah, this is, I think it's just strong in the sense that, for one thing, like he's over in 3 of the last 4, basically 6 of the last 8. He had one game with 9 points, 10 rebounds. But I think where underdog is mispricing this is in the realization that his points and rebounds move together so much because it's dependent on the fact that he is playing these like 41-minute a night games. He will get some putbacks. So a lot of the time, like, how is he scoring? By getting an offensive rebound. And so I think the points and rebounds are more correlated than Underdog realizes. And it's priced as if it's just like two completely independent bets that he's going to get over 10 points, or that he's going to get 10 plus points and 10 plus rebounds. So I'm with you. I definitely think this is strong. I think we're going to continue to see this multiplier come down and down and down. And the double-double for him might end up being like 0.8 to 0.9x on most nights.
Yeah, I mean, as long as we continue to see this same rotation, and like going back to last season where, like, again, it was a slightly different team and some of these games came in April when we saw many of the main rotation guys from the Rockets sitting down, or sitting out rather, but played more than 31 and a half minutes in 14 games last season, 12 double-doubles in those 14 games. So again, this is a very, very strong option here on Underdog.
Yep. Where do you want to go next?
I want to stay with the same team. Let's go to Cam Whitmore, another guy who benefits from Jabari Smith's absence, from Tari Eason's absence. Cam Whitmore's points prop is set at 10.5 here. We've got him projected for 13.7 points in the FTN fantasy model this morning. I believe it's at 21.5 minutes in terms of that projection. So he could come in a few minutes under. He could go a few minutes over. And regardless of that variance around that minutes projection, he's over this number in 8 of 11 games when playing just more than 12 minutes this season. And last year, 38 games in his rookie season of 12 or more minutes. He was over this number in 33 of those 38. This line is too damn low for the role that Cam Whitmore is playing. It's not a massive role, but it's a solid rotational role off the bench. You expect him to get into the right around 20, into the low 20s here on a game-to-game basis with the guys they have out. I got nothing else to say, man. This is very, very strong, even going back to his rookie year.
He's nearly at 10 points per 15 minutes played. So with this minutes projection, this is just really, really strong. I'm definitely on board. And I also think there's potentially some correlation here, some positive correlation, I should say, with Amen Thompson. You mentioned like one of the risks for Thompson is what if Houston just gets blown out? And it's like, it's not necessarily that, hey, Whitmore would be better in a close game than a blowout. He might play more in a blowout. We saw him play 34 minutes when they lost by 23 to Boston. It's more of, hey, when Whitmore's on the floor, if he's scoring, that's helping prevent the blowout, which helps Amen Thompson get there.
And I also just want to mention that Alperen Şengün and Steven Adams are not combining for 48 minutes game in and game out. Mm-hmm. That means Amen Thompson is playing center for all of those minutes. That neither of those true centers are on the floor. We saw Thompson play center down the stretch of last season, so that's something that Coach Udoka is perfectly fine with doing. Now, against Denver tonight, should we expect that? No, I think we projected 47 minutes at center between Şengün and Steven Adams because Jokic on the other side, as much as I love Amen, I don't think he can handle the Joker. But that is something else to consider when you're looking at Amen Thompson over the coming games because it doesn't feel like this double-double prop is going away anytime soon. I think I'd probably still like it at 1x, but at the 1.17x, again, it's a building block for me here this morning.
For sure. Do you have any others you really like? Or you want to go right into stocks?
I've got one more. I do. I know I saw you pulling up on screen. Zed's in here. So he showed up a couple minutes after our 12:30 start time. See our buddy Strangus in here, Ian and P Mike, those guys going back and forth in the chat here. Let's go to my Spurs here tonight. And I mentioned familiar names. It's not just Amen Thompson. I'm going back to Julian Champagnie here tonight. We already know Jeremy Sohan is ruled out. So we had this points prop against the Lakers the other night at 7.5, and the Spurs pulled off the road win. Julian Champagnie had his worst shooting game of the season. 1 of 7 from the field, 0 of 6 from 3. You can go through his game logs. That was a outlier game in the truest sense of the term. And you can see we've got him projected for 23 minutes here tonight, and the model is spitting out 12 points as his projection. So, like, again, give or take a couple minutes, it's still going to look strong with this 8.5 line at Underdog. He's over this number in 29 of 38 appearances this season. And you may say to me, well, Zach, now Champagnie is coming off the bench. So, like, that lines up with maybe he's under in a lot of these bench appearances. Not the case. 12 games coming off the bench for the Spurs this year. Champagnie over in 8 of those 12 games. And this is a pretty big pace-up spot for the Spurs with the Grizzlies coming to town. You can see, I think the Grizzlies are actually 2.5-point road favorites here, which seems fair to me, especially with no Sohan. But a 238.5 implied total I don't expect Julian Champagny to follow up his worst game of the season with an identical one. So I'm going to trust the model. I'm going to trust what I see game in and game out from this team, from this player. I like the over, or the higher than rather, on 8.5 points. So that is a 3-pick entry I have in here this morning.
In a weird way, his over 6 in 17 minutes is actually very encouraging for this pick, because one of the things we talked about going into that game was the fact that, hey, the last 2 times he only played 16 minutes, he still got up. It was 6 threes in one game, 2 of 6, and then 9 in the other, 3 of 9. So we were basically saying, hey, the shot volume is going to be there. And one of the risks to saying that is, what if the early shots don't fall? Does the shot volume go away when the early ones don't fall? And the answer apparently is no. He still shot 6 threes in his 17 minutes. Probably would have played more if those shots were falling, and maybe we will see him play more tonight. But it's basically just the exact same thought we had the other night. He's shooting so much where even if you get the lower end of his minutes, there's a good chance he hits this over on point. So I like all 3 of these.
We did just get news, and this will pertain more to our DFS discussion. Derek Lively x-rayed on that sprained ankle, results negative, so no timeline established as of now, but I think that's confirmation we will not have Derek Lively tonight. So Daniel Gafford time in our DFS lineups. But getting back to the props here, we can go ahead and go to the stocks board. As we pull that up, Alex, I want to mention the 2 props that I like more on Prize Picks because we're getting that lower number. Jaden McDaniels tonight against the Warriors, higher than 4.5 rebounds over there. His rebounds projection here at FTN is north of 6 this morning. That checks out. I dove into that. We're getting, I think, the 4.5 line, but like a 0.9x there on underdog. So I'm passing on that for now. If you want to go up to 5.5, it's not one that I'm absolutely in love with. But if I'm going to attack Jaden McDaniels on underdog, I'll take it up to 5.5 for, I think, 1.16x, I believe it was. And then Karl Anthony Towns rebounds at underdog set at 13. We've got him projected north of 15. You get the 13.5 with, I think, 1.04x on underdog. So I like those 2 more on Prize Picks, and they're usable in the ways I described there on underdog, but don't make my favorite there to be in the top 3.
Yeah, makes sense to me. All right, let's talk some stocks. We don't have any that we love at this point in the morning, it seems. The first thing that popped to me was the fact that we do have a line for Jaren Jackson Jr. at 2.5 stocks. We haven't projected way over that. He's up to averaging 3.2 on the season. Not the best matchup of San Antonio, but a decent one. The problem is it's 0.91x. Do you like this enough to go to it at 0.91x, assuming we can get better than, we already have the 1.17, right? So right. Even if we went to the 0.91, we're still ahead of the typical 4-pick payout at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I do think like if this was at 1x, we would be taking it like not without hesitation, but we would be very excited, I think, to click this in. And so given that we're putting it in a potential 6-pick entry with that Amon Thompson double-double, I'm fine with it. But I'd like it a lot more if we weren't, getting penalized for adding it.
For context, we haven't projected at 3.73 stocks. Yeah. So this is
very strong in the model.
Yeah. I do think it's worth adding as long as you have something else. So I think I would put it in there. I wish that we were given some on Dyson Daniels again. Like we have Dyson Daniels projected over 4. I remember we were given 2.5 stocks for him the other day. We don't see that here today. Anything else really stand out to you? I'm kind of looking through the stocks projections. Nothing. I don't think anything is crazy strong in this one.
Sorry, I had to do a quick refresh there. Like on the surface, 1.11x for Anthony Davis over 3.5 stocks caught my eye. We do have him projected for 3.73. So again, it's not a super strong lean towards the higher than, but that's one that just from scrolling through the board did catch my eye there with that plus 1x multiplier. Outside of that, I don't think there's anything I'm absolutely in love with. Like Porzingis catches my eye, but 0.86 on the higher than 2.5 stocks there. Brook Lopez against the Magic, not a great projection there.
What do you think of Chris Dunn over 1.5 steals at 1.38x? We have him projected at 1.86 steals.
Yeah, that makes some sense to me. I guess I do. Well, that's Dennis Schroeder, not Chris Dunn. They are matched up against Brooklyn here tonight. Brooklyn, of course, stinks on purpose, and they are on the second end of a back-to-back. With that 14-point spread in favor of the Clippers and a 213.5 implied total, I'm leaning towards the idea that guys like Cam Johnson, maybe even D'Angelo Russell, we already know that Ben Simmons is going to sit here tonight. So if this game gets out of hand, and it certainly could, Chris Dunn might lose some time, and he's already not getting as rosy of a projection with Kawhi Leonard back in the mix, with KPJ back. He's been back a few games now. Terrence Mann is kind of being squeezed completely out of this rotation at this point, but there are just so many ways that Ty Lue and Jeff Van Gundy, who is standing up on the sideline just about as much as Ty Lue these days, there's so many ways that they can go in a blowout situation here that I think that's why we're getting such a strong multiplier on that. And because of the multiplier, I'm in on putting it in and taking a chance on a 6-pick play, having the Dunn prop in there. But I don't think this would make my main rotation if I'm going to round robin some 3 picks here today.
That makes sense. Do you feel like maybe we haven't projected for too many minutes?
Potentially. We got him for 24. So maybe that needs to be 22, 23. I think anything below 20 would be just flat out too low. But the Clippers, from a DFS perspective, they're a complete stay away for me here on this slate, because not only the game environment, but just the way this rotation is so muddled right now, or muddied rather, with Kawhi back.
To some degree, the Kawhi returning is definitely responsible in the sense that he's played fewer minutes. But I also think it's worth noting, sometimes when we see a big edge like this, we have to ask the question, well, why would we show such a big edge? Why would it be priced this way if it's wrong? And I think the answer is, Kawhi has come back, and in the last 5 games, he has 3 steals. Only 3 in the last 5 games. But his steals per minute has gone way down in that time. Before that, last month, it was 1, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 2, 4, 5, 1, 2, and 4 steals in the games in all of January. Now, again, he was playing more minutes there, but the steals per minute ratio very clearly was much, much higher in January. And I don't think Kawhi being back should affect his steals per minute ratio a ton. So I think that's why we are projecting such an edge here. And I also want to point out the fact, if you have a VIP subscription, you can go to the NBA same game parlay tool. And a lot of the time you will find props there that aren't on Prize Picks or aren't in the Pick'em tool. And we can see here, we have this at 53.8%. So over 50%. This is actually the exact percentage that we need to be profitable long-term on 6-pick plays in Underdog, except we're getting 1.38x, not or 1.36x, I think it was. So I think this one is really, really strong. I'm going to add this for sure.
Yeah, and I think when you dive into the math of it rather than the emotions of watching these games and looking at rotations and such and things like that, it makes a lot more sense. So I'm perfectly fine putting this in. One that I have my eye on, actually 2 of them. One from a projection standpoint. Good to see Daniel in here. Good to see Preston as well. That's an interesting one we should look into. But before we leave the stocks here, on the blocks board, Alex, there are 2. One, Mark Williams, and we have a little bit of a projection edge there for Mark Williams against the Jazz here tonight. We've got him projected for 1.73 blocks. His line is 1.5, but we are getting 1.22x on this one. So that has drawn my attention. And then one of the teams we don't have, one of the 8 teams we don't have injury reports for, are the Nuggets. Now, they did get to save some minutes on all of their legs last night in the blowout over Dallas. But if Aaron Gordon were to sit, this Peyton Watson 1.5 blocks prop for 1.09x would be, I think, a half point too low, right? When Aaron Gordon was out last week, we were seeing this consistently at 2. So at the 1.09x multiplier, it's one you would have to kind of make the decision on here before we get the injury report, because if Aaron Gordon does sit on the back-to-back, this number is vanishing. So I think Williams, the stronger one at this point, But, Watson, if you're going to play for an Aaron Gordon absence, that would also be one that catches my eye.
Yeah, I think both of those can definitely be used in some 6-pick plays. What do you think? Let's talk this Porzingis first 5 minutes pick that Preston just brought up in the chats. Let me bring that back up. Wemby over 5.5 PRA in the first 5 minutes. Also noting his first quarter points is at 5.5. The PRA does seem pretty strong to me. Let's see if we can actually find. Whoops, I put Porzingis. I want Wembanyama.
Just grayed out for me, so let me refresh.
Don't have rebounds in the first 5. Yeah, it looks like I need to refresh as well.
It's gone.
I do think it's worth saying that I think more often than not, the first 5 minutes, like the smaller time period that you are talking about, the more randomness you're inducing. And so I think we become a little bit even more at risk. Oh, this, by the way, this just went to 6.0. So I think the 5.5 was definitely low. But we're increasing the risk of finding those situations where like we're very clearly on the right side, but it's 53% or 55% and not the 60% target that we often go for. But I think the 5.5 was probably strong. I think 6.0 is probably still too low, but I don't think it's something I want to add. What do you think?
I think it is too low. I'm not worried, but I do want to note that we saw a first quarter rotation change for Wembanyama last game. Now, if that's something that continues or it was a one-off, we'll find out tonight against Memphis. But typically he's been playing about the first 5 minutes of the first quarter, rests for 3 or 4, and then comes back in bridges, similar to how we saw Derek White's rotations early in the year, where he bridges the first to second quarter. Last game, he just played the first almost 9 minutes and then came back to start the second quarter. So, again, either way, I think that 5.5 number was very strong. Again, Preston comes in here with some very strong first quarter picks when he gets the time to take a look at the board. So I don't hate taking the 6, but if it was still at 5.5, I would be right there being like, yeah, let's put this into, I would be comfortable probably putting that into any entry.
He had 9 PRA last game in the first 5 minutes. Trying to find, man, San Antonio hasn't played that often in the last few days. Let's see.
Well, they had the game canceled on Saturday for the Fires.
So let's see. I mean, the game prior, he played the first 5.43 minutes, as you were mentioning.
Yeah.
So let's see. Yeah, 3, 6. So 6 the game prior. I think the 6.0 I think is still on the correct side. I think 5.5 would have been worth adding.
Man, triple double for Wemby is 18.62x. I'm not playing it, but yeah, it's enticing. Because how many guys can get triple doubles in like 3 or 4 different ways, right? Like if he had 10 blocks, you're not surprised. 10 assists, you're not surprised. 10 steals, I would be. But like in his career, if he stays healthy, like I wouldn't put it past him to have a triple double with steals at some point. So again, I'm just having fun sprinkle jerking a little bit. But do you have any other NBA plays you want to look at, or do we have PGA plays to dive into? Anything from NFL?
Yeah, let's talk PGA for a second, and then we'll talk some NFL before we get into the ownership and GPP scores for the day. It's worth noting at this course, I think there are going to be some opportunities. I don't have any picks yet, but particularly on the birdie side, this is a week where there are 3 different courses being played at once. 2 of them average about 4.6 to 4.7 birdies per round. Those are really high numbers, and the other one's down around 4. So I think we might find some instances where Underdog is underpricing a player who's at one of the easier courses, or overpricing a player at at the tougher course. Not that it's a tough course. They're all easy golf courses, but there's a very clear difference in the difficulty, particularly in the birdie rate seen at these courses. So I think there's a chance we'll find some of that. I think the best chance, honestly, though, might be looking for players on the Nicklaus course, because the general perception is that the La Quinta course is the easiest, Nicklaus is second, and the stadium course is third. But what we see in the data is actually that the Nicholas course and the La Quinta course are pretty much just as easy as one another. So I think if I had to guess, like, what's an edge that we can find this week, it is taking overs on birdies for players at the Nicholas course, maybe even under on bogeys for players at the Nicholas course. But nothing at the moment that I have, but I did want to point that out. And then on the NFL side of things, we have a couple old reliables that I am very willing to go back to. I think the first one that comes to mind is Samaje Perine, over 8.5 receiving yards. It's just been close to automatic all season. And then from a matchup standpoint, Dallas Goedert is in a phenomenal spot here against the Rams. I think over 36.5 receiving yards is fantastic for him. We talked about this a little bit last week in regards to Minnesota, and we hit on Hawkinson over 4.5 receptions for 1.17x for the same thought. And that is, early in the season, the Rams were giving up a lot of deep completions, a lot of deep receiving yards. They very much addressed it. They've turned that into a strength of their defense. They're not giving up those deep passes anymore. But in doing so, in having those two safeties way back and deep, preventing that deep ball, what is happening? The tight end over the middle is becoming open kind of consistently. They also give up a lot of yards after the catch, which is one of Dallas Goedert's big strengths. So I think both in the sense that he should be targeted more on some pretty easy pass catches, that helps him. And then the matchup and the fact that the Rams give up some yards after catch also helps him. So over 36.5, I think, is outstanding for Goedert. And if you add those two, we're at a 6-pick play now.
I actually have an NBA play that can get us to a 6-pick if we put that Mark Williams blocks prop in there as well. Mm-hmm. The sixth one would be DeJounte Murray, higher than 1.5 first quarter rebounds. I've caught 2 zeros on this prop, but Zion should sit here on the second end of the back-to-back. DeJounte Murray is still over this number in 17 of his 24 appearances this season. 3 times he has had 0 rebounds in the first quarter. 2 of them have been when I gave out this pick. But I do think that it's telling that when we had Zion out a couple weeks ago, when we first started going to this DeJounte Murray first quarter rebounds, that we were going to the higher than 2.5 for like 1.4 something X on those days. Mm-hmm. We're getting the 1X multiplier on just 1.5 rebounds here. And again, very, very strong, especially without Zion in the lineup. So I do like this prop a good bit. And I like it more than that Mark Williams blocks pick, for what it's worth.
Yeah, I agree. I also like the steals even more than the first.
Oh yeah, that's there too.
basically the exact same conversation we had the other day. We have him projected at 2.43 steals, which is at 64.3%. Again, you can use the same game parlay tool to find that one right now. So what do you think? Do you want the first quarter rebounds or do you want the 1.5 steals?
Oh my God. I really think they're both very, very strong.
Yeah.
I went to this steals prop yesterday and he had 1. So of course, if I go away from that here today, he'll have fucking 4. I think the stronger projection in the model, and we're going to get a full 48, you would think, for him to achieve it, is the steals prop. But I'm going to have entries with both. Like I literally just slammed in the rebounds prop for Murray and the steals prop in 2 different 6-pick plays with the other 5 that we've talked about.
I like that. I also think you could do some stuff here where like you're doing, hey, I'm going to do 1 steals pick, and then that's a 3-pick play, and then you have the 6-pick, and then you do 1 points pick, things like that. So lots of different ways we can approach tonight. I don't know exactly what combinations I will have, but definitely want to get some NFL picks out there for the people as well today. So make sure you guys are kind of hanging around the Pick'em channel all day long. We will tag at everyone once we have those ready.
And I saw a question in there from Daniel about, can you give a quick analysis on Walker Kessler against Mark Williams matchup with Walker Kessler coming off 2+ days of rest, I believe. In what sense, Daniel? Like from a DFS perspective, like what props we would like? Because like we could talk actual basketball here, but Alex and I have to get going here, and like that would be more of a conversation for like a FTN Fast Break podcast or something like that. But like DFS props, like if you have a question about that, because I can sit here and talk, below average center matchups here, but we could also move on to DFS as well.
I think the way we can answer this is just by talking about the general matchup for both of these players. Utah has been a phenomenal matchup for opposing centers They give up more points than usual. They give up a lot more steals than usual. They give up more blocks than usual. So you get that aspect of it. And then on the other side, also see kind of the exact same thing on the other side of the board here. So I think it's a good matchup for both. I don't really care about like the individual, like what happens when it's Kessler versus Mark Williams on a post-up.
Yeah.
I care more about just what's the general production environment for the two players in the game. And it's very positive for both.
Yeah, I agree on that. And if I was going to say like which guy had the upper hand from a fantasy standpoint or a statistical standpoint to kind of bridge the gap between DFS and our prop pick'ems here, it would be Mark Williams.
Yeah.
Because look, man, Charlotte, and we can transition into our DFS talk here. Charlotte are 5-point road favorites. I don't care who you're playing, and they are playing one of the worst teams in the league right now with how many absences the Jazz have. But like that is very telling here. And so, okay, looking at rebounds, well, again, I would give the edge to Mark Williams there over Walker Kessler. It's a good matchup for Kessler as well. And are we looking at like a Kessler rebounds prop here or both?
In particular, from just a pure like data perspective, Utah is a plus 4% matchup for opposing centers in their rebounds, and Charlotte is plus 12%.
Well, so like, if you could get, and maybe you can on Prize Picks, I can do a quick little search over here on Prize Picks. If you could get the 11.5 rebound line for Walker Kessler at just the 1x multiplier, I'm fine taking a higher than stance on that, but you're getting, I think, 0.94x there or 0.93 over on Underdog. So it's not one that I'm using. And if you're looking at the projections relative to potentially laddering that up to 12.5, it would be a lean towards a higher than. We have him just a hair over 13 rebounds here tonight. Kessler, that is. And he's up at 12 flat over there on Prize Picks. So not really getting any more of an advantage than you have there on Underdog. What do you think about Mark Williams here? Because his rebound line, we actually like, I might lean towards the lower than there with the 1.12x.
Yeah, I think it's just a stay away for me.
Yep, nothing that really stands out. But if you are fixated on getting one of those in, I think the Kessler rebounds up to 12.5. If that is an option, that would be where I go between those two.
I don't know if he's a big enough name to make the cut for fantasy points on Underdog, but if I took an over on Mark Williams, I think I would want to wait for fantasy points because it's just a strong all-around matchup. It's a strong stocks matchup. And like sometimes when the stocks matchup is really good, you just take the stocks pick. But other times and certain players like Mark Williams, I think especially, when the matchup is good all around, you just lower variance by going to fantasy points. And then he gets there if he has a spike game in points. He gets there if he has a spike game in rebounds. He gets there if he has a spike game in either of the stocks departments. So I think that's the way that I would approach him. If you don't get a fantasy points prop for him, I think it's just the 1.22x on blocks that is my favorite for him.
Yeah, I'm right there with you still. If you're over on Prize Picks, 31.5 fantasy score for Mark Williams, I would take the higher than over on Prize Picks. Okay, so from the DFS perspective now, again, excited for this slate with all of the craziness that is going to ensue. 9 games on DraftKings, 11 over there on FanDuel. Still waiting on, I believe, at 7 of these because I think we got Chicago's injury report. We've got Q tags. The word yesterday was Desumu's back today. Lonzo will sit out. I think we have another Q tag there, but not super important to the overall slate. Couple notes on some of those values. I mentioned Daniel Gafford earlier with Derek Lively, all but officially ruled out here in this morning. So like you could see Kleber start, you could see any number of crazy things, but where Daniel Gafford's price is at on both sites, you see in the GPP scores here, even at 51% projected ownership, 4,300 on DraftKings, the third highest tournament score here on DraftKings in the model on the morning run, just behind $200 more expensive Wendell Carter Jr. with no Goga Batadze here tonight for the Magic, going up against the Bucks. That makes a lot of sense as well. So like, and then Onyeka Okongwu, who dropped a bomb last night in a good way from a fantasy perspective. He's 4,800 against the Bulls, 241 or 241.5, I believe, implied total in that Hawks and that's up to 243 now with the Bulls 2-point home favorites. So he makes some sense as well. And then you've got the spend up centers. The model in terms of the GPP scores likes Towns, but like Jokic and Wemby tonight look fantastic. And hot take alert, Alex. But look, Jokic, I slightly prefer to Wemby here tonight. I believe Wemby is pulling more ownership. And we don't have Jokic on DraftKings, so is he missing? We do have Jokic on DraftKings, so he may be missing he may be missing here from the projections on DraftKings. So we'll get that fixed up. Let me see if I can slide over.
I might be able to do it on the fly here, Zach.
Okay, so
I'm guessing it's a copy paste thing.
Yeah, so on DraftKings, the projection that will show up there when Alex gets this fixed is right around 63.5 fantasy points. So he is like 6 points clear of the field. And with just a $1,100 difference between he and Wemby and the ownership difference, I lean towards Jokic here tonight in a game like in Denver, 231.5 total, 1 point spread against the Rockets. Who's guarding him on the right? It ain't Şengün, right? Amin Thompson's too small. Like Steven Adams might be their best bet. But I slightly lean Jokic at lower ownership than Wemby, and it takes a lot of me setting aside my fan emotions to prefer anybody over Victor Wembanyama. But even at the guard position, right? We talked about Towns and Jokic and Wemby at the top end of center, but LaMelo Ball as a 5-point favorite in Utah, right? Like, I actually may have some blowout concerns there, but LaMelo can get whatever he wants, and he does do whatever he wants. It's a pretty ridiculous brand of basketball, as fun as it is to watch as a third party with no Charlotte Hornets fandom. But you see the model preferring, in terms of the GPP score, Trae Young. And I think that also makes sense, Trae, with no Jalen Johnson against Chicago in the game with the highest implied total on the night. So we have a pretty appetizing menu of spend up options here today. And again, the dominoes are going to fall from these injury reports. And we'll see how it shakes out closer to lock. In terms of some more like team specific notes, you'll also see Utah popping up in the top end of these ownerships on both sites because Kessler is back. Keontae George upgraded to questionable, but still no John Collins, still no Jordan Clarkson. Now Colin Sexton is going to rest here tonight. Lauri Markkanen is ruled out once again. So, your Bryce Sensabaugh, if he's given the green light to go, Kessler in play, but nowhere near a priority. Isaiah Collier's price is up. If Keontae George does in fact sit out again tonight with that Q tag, then Collier's in play. But if Keontae George plays without any sort of massive minutes restriction, he'll probably look like the best option from Utah in a decent matchup against Charlotte. Mentioned Zion should sit right when we were talking about DeJounte, but that should bring either Javonte Green, maybe Jeremiah Robinson-Earl, Jordan Hawkins. One of those three should start. Right now we have it projected to be Javonte Green. But if Hawkins got in there at min price, we're going to have some interest in him as well in a game where the Pelicans are 2.5-point dogs at home against the Mavericks. Amin Thompson is still too cheap on both sites. Like, I will continue to play him around an 8K price tag on both sites when he's getting 38 to 40 minutes a game. We mentioned Wendell Carter Jr. at the top with Goga out. And then with no Sohan for San Antonio, right? Steph Castle, price did come up a little bit on both sites. Still a very, very strong value. You should not expect the type of scoring output you got last game on a nightly basis, but he is still too cheap, especially on DraftKings, where you can see third in the value rankings here, just behind Gafford and Sensabaugh.
Yeah, I don't know if you noticed as you were going through there, but Jokic is back now on the table here. Does have a very solid GPP score too, by the way, 2.8. Look at that ceiling, 78.3, even kind of shining well ahead of both Wemby and Giannis here from a ceiling perspective. And that's kind of the other thing that I notice here is Giannis close to Wemby in the projection, and consequently at the different ownerships, you do see a better GPP score for Giannis than Wemby. But man, there's some actual separation between Wemby and Giannis in the ceiling department, which is probably because he has that stocks upside that Giannis used to have, doesn't quite have in the same way anymore. So I think this might be a situation where I would actually be very much okay going against the GPP scores going to Wemby, especially if that $400 difference is meaningful for you.
I would absolutely prefer Wemby over Giannis here today. He is a very clear third for me of those 11K and above guys here. Like I mentioned, kind of what I expected there with the Jokic ownership once you got that updated there. Almost half the ownership of Wemby here tonight. Like, we have no issue fitting in whomever we want into our lineups tonight. So if I can do that with a lower owned Jokic here, like that's probably the way I'm going to go. I'm a 20 max MME type of player on DraftKings, so I'm not full fading Wemby by any means, but I will certainly be over 14% for Jokic. And I do think we see the numbers on a lot of these spend ups trickle upwards, getting closer to lock, because we're going to get more and more value, and people are going to, the ownership is going to kind of coalesce around the strongest of the value bunch.
I also think, as we've pointed to a number of times this season, like when we get these instances where one game is appearing near the top of the JPP scores, like Atlanta, Chicago, Atlanta, Chicago, we've got a lot of these guys near the top, and we also have a nice mix of expensive guys and a few role players like Okongwu here, where you could just game stack the heck out of this thing, and I think you'd be in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, in our Chicago projections, we have Ayo Dosunmu, who's listed questionable. We have him in based on yesterday's reporting. We have Lonzo Ball out, even though he's technically questionable based on yesterday's reporting. So I wouldn't expect, like, if we do get that news in the order that we expect it to happen, like, I don't think much will change in a positive manner here for Chicago, because we're already expecting those two pieces to break, as I described.
Is Gafford a lock for you?
No. There's just too much value. Even in one lineup, I think it's, again, when we're sitting here at 1:15-ish Eastern time, like, there's way too much time and way too many injury reports we still need to get, which we'll get a number of them, I think, here at 1:30. But it's damn near impossible for me to say on a guy like Gafford, on a slate like this, that I would lock in anybody at this point. But I love me some Daniel Gafford, so like, he's going to be in my lineups here tonight. We just got to see, like, he could come off the bench again here, like Jason Kidd, especially like Yves Missi. I think Maxi Kleber can kind of hold his own, right? Dwight Powell is there as well. So we'll see what he does. He'll be strong regardless at that price.
Yeah, I think he's also a candidate to not come in at 32.5%, but by lock, he's projecting at 50, and in single entries, it might be 70%, something crazy like that. In which case, I might even flip and just say, hey, like, I'm not going to lock in a guy that we're projecting at 24 minutes or something like that. I might even actively want to fade if he's going to be that popular. So I definitely want to just kind of monitor that ownership. If he does stay in this range where he's not like the clear most popular play in the slate, then I do think he is a very strong play.
Well, easy positional pivot there, $200 more for Wendell Carter Jr. Again, that's just kind of a very small example of how many options you have to get different with your value tonight. And again, like, don't run away from a play just because they're high owned. Like, you can get different elsewhere. But it's something, again, you just got to pay attention to. We've got about 6 hours until lock. Plenty of stuff will change. So hopefully this was, again, we try to provide that nice baseline for you here right around your lunchtime, Monday through Friday. And again, like, if you're playing these slates, you need to be subscribed. You need to be in that NBA DFS channel where we're reading and reacting to all of this news leading up to lock.
Anthony saying he thought he'd never hear the day where you took Jokic over Wemby. As if you don't play Jokic in DFS. Like, come on.
Yeah. I mean, clearly Anthony, our good buddy here, the Brewmaster, was not tuned in to the entirety of the preseason where I had Jokic ranked over Wemby in best ball, and the field had Wemby over Jokic. And I think it's going better for those that took Jokic number one than Wemby right now. I'll have to check in on my best ball teams, I guess, to confirm that.
I think you're probably right. Any closing thoughts?
No, man. Like I said, excited for this slate. More games than we've had in a number of weeks, so it's going to be crazy. That usually spells positive results here for us on the DFS side of things. And as we get these injury reports, more props will populate. We'll get the free throws. We'll get the fantasy points on underdog, so our subscribers can see us later in the Pick'em Games channel. And I'm sure you're going to be coming with the heat on some PGA and some NFL as the weekend approaches.
Absolutely. And you kind of alluded to it earlier, but a reminder, our NFL projections are ready to go. Got them up nice and early this week. So plenty of opportunity to beat the market, whether you're just doing props, whether you're doing underdog, pick them, whatever. So We will see you guys in the chat. Thanks again for tuning in.